My name is Lila, and I just graduated from high school. I live, or should I say lived, with my parents, Sarah and David Mitchell, in a modest two-story house in Pennsylvania. There's also my older brother Jake, though he moved out a few years ago to a nearby city. He's 25 now, 7 years older than me, and has always been the golden child of our family. Growing up, I watched how my parents bent over backwards to give Jake everything he wanted. If he showed even the slightest interest in something, they'd jump at the chance to support him. Hockey? They bought him the most expensive gear. Drawing? The finest art supplies. Skateboarding? A custom-made board. It didn't matter that he'd get bored after a few months and move on to the next thing, they were always ready to fund his next adventure. I remember this one Christmas that really stuck with me. Jake's birthday is a week before Christmas, and that year, when he turned 16, my parents bought him this super expensive gaming computer he'd been talking about nonstop. Must have cost them a fortune. Come Christmas morning, all I got was a card saying Merry Christmas. They said they'd run out of money. That's pretty much how it always went. Jake's birthdays were these huge celebrations with awesome presents, and I'd get whatever was left over at Christmas, if anything at all. My parents never really bothered with my birthdays. A small cake, maybe a new shirt or some school supplies, that was about it. No parties, no celebrations, nothing special. That's why I was completely thrown off when they sat me down in our living room last week, just days after my graduation. Lila, Mom said, smoothing her shirt like she always does when she's trying to appear casual, we've been thinking. You're turning 18 soon, and it's a big milestone. We want to throw you a proper party. I nearly choked on my coffee. A party? I asked, sure I must have heard wrong. Dad nodded, looking unusually enthusiastic. Yes, sweetheart. We'll invite the whole family, make it a real celebration. I sat there, staring at them both, trying to figure out what the catch was. My parents aren't the type to suddenly change their ways without a reason. Something was up, I could feel it in my gut. Why now? I asked, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. You've never wanted to throw me a party before. Well, you're graduating high school, going to college soon, Mom said, waving her hand dismissively. It's different now. You're becoming an adult. I nodded slowly, but something didn't feel right. The way they were acting, the sudden interest in celebrating my birthday, it was all too convenient. But I couldn't put my finger on what exactly was wrong. Over the next few days, I actually started getting excited about the party. Maybe I'd been too quick to judge my parents' intentions. After all, it made sense, I was turning 18, had just graduated with honors, and was heading off to college soon. Perhaps they'd finally realized that I deserved some recognition too. I kept catching Mom on the phone, talking in hushed tones about party arrangements. She was ordering a fancy cake from the local bakery, planning out decorations, and putting together a guest list. Dad seemed unusually invested too, cleaning up the backyard and fixing that wobbly patio furniture he'd been ignoring for months. Do you need any help? I offered one afternoon, finding Mom in the kitchen surrounded by party planning notes. She jumped slightly, quickly shuffling some papers together. No, sweetie. We want this to be a surprise. Just focus on enjoying your special day. I shrugged and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. Okay, if you're sure. By the way, is Jake coming? Of course he is, Mom replied, but something in her voice sounded off. He wouldn't miss his little sister's big day. I wanted to believe her, but Jake hadn't returned any of my texts in the past week. Typical Jake, really, always too busy with his own life to care about anyone else's. 2 days before the party, I was heading downstairs to get a glass of water when I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. I normally wouldn't eavesdrop, but something in Dad's tone made me pause at the top of the stairs. David, are you sure everything will be perfect? Mom's voice was tense. Your mother is very particular about these things. I froze. Grandma Eleanor was coming? She lived in Massachusetts and rarely visited us. The last time I'd seen her was almost 2 years ago. Sarah, we have to make this work, Dad replied urgently. Mom needs to see that we're making an effort with Lila. You know how she gets about how we treat the kids. I know. She's always going on about how we favor Jake. And we can't afford to upset her right now. That money she gave us last year is the only thing keeping us afloat. If she decides to stop helping us. Their voices dropped lower, but I'd heard enough. Everything suddenly made sense, the sudden interest in my birthday, the elaborate party plans, all of it. This wasn't about me at all. This was about impressing Grandma Eleanor. I slid down to sit on the top step, my throat tight with disappointment. Grandma Eleanor had always been different from my parents. She saw through Jake's charm and actually paid attention to me. Every time she visited, she'd point out how unfairly my parents treated me compared to Jake. And I knew she was wealthy. She lived in this beautiful historic house in Massachusetts and had helped my parents financially several times over the years. The pieces all fell into place. My parents weren't throwing this party to celebrate my achievements or to make up for years of neglect. They were doing it to put on a show for Grandma Eleanor, to convince her they were good parents who treated both their children equally. They were trying to secure their financial lifeline. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to the sound of voices and my mother's overly cheerful tone floating up from outside. I peered through my bedroom window and my heart leaped. There was Grandma Eleanor, climbing out of her practical Toyota Camry. I threw on some clothes and rushed downstairs, nearly colliding with Dad in the hallway. The moment she saw me, Grandma Eleanor's face lit up with genuine warmth, something I hadn't seen much of in our house lately. She opened her arms wide, and I practically ran into them. There's my beautiful girl. She hugged me tight, smelling of fresh-baked cookies and that mild lavender soap she always used. When she pulled back, her eyes were sparkling. Let me look at you properly. A high school graduate already. What's next for you, sweetheart? We moved into the living room, where Mom had already arranged the furniture to look like something out of a home decor magazine. I sat next to Grandma on the sofa while my parents perched nervously on the edge of their seats. Well, I started, trying to ignore my mother's intense stare. I actually got accepted to several colleges. 2 of them offered me spots. That's wonderful. Grandma squeezed my hand. Tell me about them. The state university offered me a full scholarship, I explained, watching my parents nod approvingly. And then there's Brington College. I hesitated, knowing my parents thought this option was off the table. It's a really prestigious private school, but the tuition is about $25,000 a year. Grandma Eleanor nodded thoughtfully, a small smile playing at her lips. She didn't say anything, but something in her expression made me wonder if she was already forming plans of her own. The doorbell started ringing as guests arrived, first Aunt Marie and Uncle Bob, then my cousins, followed by some family friends. Mom rushed around, playing the perfect hostess, while Dad manned the grill in the backyard. But there was one person notably absent, Jake. I tried calling him 3 times, but each time it went straight to voicemail. I asked my mom about him, and she replied he was busy with his auto parts company, but would definitely find time to congratulate me later. The party was in full swing by mid-afternoon. The backyard was filled with the chatter of relatives, family friends, and the smell of grilled food. I tried to enjoy myself, but I couldn't shake the weird vibe coming from my parents. They kept hovering around Grandma Eleanor like anxious satellites, making sure her glass was always full and her plate never empty. I was just finishing a piece of birthday cake when Grandma Eleanor suddenly stood up, tapping her fork against her glass. The chatter died down as everyone turned to look at her. I'd like to say something, she announced, her voice carrying across the yard. Today, we're celebrating not just Lila's 18th birthday, but also her acceptance into college. She smiled warmly at me. Lila, honey, I've watched you grow up into an incredible young woman. Unlike some people, she paused meaningfully, you've always worked hard and never taken anything for granted. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. I could see Mom's fingers nervously shredding a paper napkin. When you told me about your acceptance to Brington College, Grandma continued, I could see how much you wanted to go there, even though you thought it was out of reach. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. That's why I've decided to give you a special gift. She walked over and handed me the envelope. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a check. When I saw the amount, I thought I was seeing things wrong. I blinked and looked again. $100,000, Grandma announced to the stunned crowd. Enough to cover your tuition at Brington College. The silence lasted for about 3 seconds, before erupting into chaos. Aunt Marie let out a gasp that could have sucked in half the oxygen in the yard. Uncle Bob started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. My cousins were whooping and cheering. I just sat there, staring at the check through tears that wouldn't stop falling. This wasn't just money, it was freedom, opportunity, a chance to go to my dream school without drowning in debt. Grandma, I choked out, standing up to hug her. I can't believe, thank you so much. From the corner of my eye, I could see my parents. They weren't clapping. Mom's face had gone pale, and Dad looked like he'd been hit with a brick. They were whispering to each other, their heads close together, occasionally shooting glances at the check in my hands. I spent most of the evening talking with Grandma Eleanor. She told me stories about her college days and gave me advice about living on campus. It felt like the first time someone in my family was actually excited about my future. The guests gradually filtered out as evening fell, leaving behind empty plates and half-full cups. Grandma Eleanor decided to spend the night, saying she was too tired to drive home. I helped her set up in our guest room, grateful for a few more hours with her. The next morning, after a quick breakfast, Grandma hugged me tight and headed home, promising to call soon to help me plan for college. I watched her car disappear down the street, still hardly believing what had happened. It wasn't until that evening that Jake finally showed up. He walked in without knocking, looking like he'd been sucking on lemons. His expensive designer clothes were wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Happy birthday, sis, he mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. No hug, no card, not even a token gift. He headed straight for the kitchen where our parents were, leaving me standing in the hallway. That evening, the atmosphere at the dinner table was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jake sat across from me, slouched in his chair and playing with his phone. Dad cleared his throat several times before finally speaking. Lila, honey, we need to have a serious family discussion, he began, setting down his fork. Your brother's been going through a difficult time. His auto parts business, well, things haven't been going as planned. Jake suddenly looked up from his phone, his face drawn. The banks are breathing down my neck, he muttered. I took out some loans to expand the business, but the market crashed, and now they want their money back. I couldn't help but scoff. Really? Because your Instagram shows you vacationing in Hawaii, just last month. With different girls in every photo, by the way. Stay out of my social media, Jake snapped, his face reddening. That's none of your business. Calm down, both of you, Dad interrupted. Lila, this is serious. Your brother could lose everything. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. What does any of this have to do with me? Mom and Dad exchanged one of their loaded looks, the kind that made it clear they'd rehearsed this conversation. Well, sweetheart, Mom said, her voice honey-sweet, family always helps family. That's what we've always taught you, right? My blood ran cold as I started to understand where this was going. We think, Dad continued, that the money Grandma gave you could really help Jake out of this situation. I stared at them in disbelief. You want me to give Jake my college money? It makes perfect sense, Jake chimed in, suddenly animated. My business is established. It's more important than some college degree you might not even use. That money is for my education, I protested, my voice rising. Grandma gave it to me specifically for Brington. You got a full ride to state, Mom countered. You can still go to college. But Jake needs this money now. No, the word came out firm and clear. That money is mine. Grandma gave it to me. The change in their faces was instant. Dad exploded out of his chair, his hand clamping around my wrist like a vice. He yanked me away from the table, ignoring my cry of pain. "You'll go to your room right now," he snarled, dragging me toward the stairs. "And you'll stay there until you come to your senses. Don't even think about calling your grandmother. If you breathe a word of this to her, you're out of this house forever. Do you understand me? We'll disown you." I lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the house settling. My wrist still ached where Dad had grabbed me. Around midnight, I heard my parents and Jake talking in low, angry voices downstairs, but I couldn't make out the words. Eventually, the house fell silent. By 5 in the morning, I'd made up my mind. I pulled my backpack from under the bed and started packing. Documents first: birth certificate, social security card, high school diploma. My laptop went in next, then some clothes and toiletries. I checked my wallet. I had about $300 saved up from my part-time job at the library. The check from Grandma was safely tucked into a book I kept on my nightstand. I added it to my documents, double-checking that everything important was secure. Moving like a ghost, I crept down the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked. The house was dark and quiet except for Dad's snoring from the master bedroom. I grabbed my phone charger from the living room and some granola bars from the kitchen. The morning air was cool as I slipped out the back door. I didn't look back. At the train station, my phone started buzzing. Mom's face flashed on the screen. I declined the call. Then one from Jake, declined. Dad, declined. Messages started flooding in. "Where are you? Come home right now. You're being ridiculous. Think about your brother. If you don't come back immediately, you'll regret it." I turned off notifications and bought a ticket to Massachusetts. The train wouldn't leave for another hour, so I sat in the station's cafe, my backpack clutched tight against my chest, jumping at every sound. It was late afternoon when I finally reached Grandma Eleanor's house. She opened the door and her eyes went wide with surprise. "Lila, what on earth?" She ushered me inside. "Your father called me this morning. He said you'd run off with some boy, that you were planning to waste the college money on parties and—" "That's a lie." The words burst out of me. "They wanted me to give the money to Jake. His business is failing, and they tried to force me to give him my college fund. When I refused, Dad—" I touched my wrist where the bruises were forming. "They locked me in my room and threatened to disown me if I told you." Grandma's face went from concerned to thunderous. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and dialed Dad's number, putting it on speaker. "David? Yes, Lila's here." "Oh, thank God," Dad's voice crackled through the speaker. "Mom, she's been acting out, making up stories." "Save it," Grandma cut him off. "She told me everything. About Jake's failing business, about you trying to steal her college fund, about you threatening her." "Mom, she's lying. She's just being dramatic." I said save it. Grandma's voice could have frozen fire. "I've watched for years as you favored Jake, as you spoiled him rotten while neglecting Lila. I've helped you financially time and time again, hoping you'd change. Well, I'm done. From this moment, you can consider my financial support ended. And I'll be calling my lawyer tomorrow to update my will. You and Jake won't be seeing a penny." She hung up, then turned to me, her face softening. "You'll stay here with me until college starts," she said firmly. "And don't worry about a thing." Living with Grandma Eleanor was like stepping into a different world. Every morning, I'd wake up to the smell of coffee and whatever she was baking. Her specialty was apple pie, but she made amazing blueberry muffins too. I helped around the house, doing the cleaning and laundry. It wasn't because she asked me to, I wanted to contribute somehow. We fell into an easy rhythm together, sharing meals, watching old movies, and talking about everything and nothing. My phone kept buzzing with messages and calls. Mom, Dad, and Jake tried every platform they could think of: phone calls, texts, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Their messages ranged from guilt-tripping to angry to manipulative. I ignored them all. The summer passed quietly. Finally, August arrived, and it was time for me to start at Brington. Grandma helped me move into my dorm room, making my bed with fresh sheets and arranging my things just so. My roommate, Sarah, seemed nice, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly excited about my future. The first month of college was a whirlwind of new experiences. Classes were challenging but fascinating, I was making friends, and I'd even joined the campus newspaper. For once, I wasn't living in Jake's shadow, I was just Lila, finding my own path. Then one Tuesday, my resident advisor knocked on my door. "Lila, your parents are here. They're waiting at the campus coffee shop." My stomach dropped, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. I found them sitting at a corner table, both looking somewhat deflated compared to the last time I'd seen them. "Lila," Mom reached for my hand, but I kept them firmly in my lap. "You look good. What do you want?" I asked, getting straight to the point. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We wanted to apologize. We were wrong to try to take your college money. We were wrong to threaten you. We were wrong about a lot of things." I waited, knowing there was more. There always was with them. "We were hoping," Dad continued, his voice carefully measured, "that maybe you could talk to your grandmother about her will. We're not asking for your money anymore, but—" "No," I said simply. "If you want to fix things with Grandma, you'll have to talk to her yourselves. I'm not getting involved." They exchanged frustrated looks. "Lila, be reasonable," Dad started. "I am being reasonable. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. If you want to repair your relationship with Grandma, that's between you and her." Mom's face hardened. "So that's it? You won't help your family at all?" I stood up, gathering my things. "You know what's funny? When you wanted my college money, it was family helps family. But you never helped me, ever. It only goes one way with you, doesn't it?" 2 months into my first semester at Brington, I got a call from Aunt Marie. I almost didn't answer, she'd always been closer to Mom's side of things, but something made me pick up. "Lila, are you sitting down?" Her voice was hushed, like she was sharing state secrets. "I thought you should know what's happening back home. Jake's business, it's completely gone under. He owes the banks hundreds of thousands. He's moved back in with your parents." I let that sink in. The mighty Jake, who'd always looked down on my modest college plans, was back in his childhood bedroom. "Your parents," Aunt Marie continued, "they're spending their retirement savings to help him with the debts. They're talking about taking out a second mortgage on the house." Later that same week, Grandma called. "I had some visitors today," she said, and I could hear the weariness in her voice. "Your parents showed up on my doorstep. They were begging me to help with Jake's debts. Said they were going to lose everything." She paused. "I told them no. Said they needed to handle this situation themselves for once." "How did they take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Your mother cried, your father got angry. But I stood firm. I told them this was the consequence of years of spoiling Jake rotten while ignoring you." As the semester progressed, more news trickled in through various relatives. Dad had taken a second job. Mom was selling her jewelry. Jake had the audacity to buy a new iPhone while living rent-free on their dime. During fall break, I went to stay with Grandma. We baked pies together, and she helped me with my term paper research. She'd set up a proper guest room for me, with a desk and everything I needed for studying. "Your midterm grades came," she mentioned one evening. "Straight as. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Grandma." I hesitated before asking, "Do you ever regret cutting them off?" She set down her knitting and looked at me seriously. "Not for a second. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people is let them face the consequences of their actions." She was right, of course. Every time I heard about my family's financial struggles, a small part of me felt guilty. But then I'd remember all the years of favoritism, all the Christmases with just a card while Jake got expensive gifts, all the times they dismissed my achievements while celebrating Jake's smallest accomplishments. Now I was thriving at Brington, making friends, earning top grades, and planning for a future I'd chosen. Meanwhile, they were dealing with the consequences of their choices. It wasn't my job to fix their mistakes, it never had been. The last I heard, Jake was talking about some new business idea he had, and my parents were still somehow trying to find ways to fund it. Some patterns are hard to break, I guess. But I had broken free of those patterns, thanks to Grandma's gift and her belief in me.